I'm okay. My wife and I want to come in and talk to you.
I tell you, I'm there every day, all day.
You're running the show here.
I never go away.
We've had a term life insurance policy for years, and now it seemed up on the cash value, and they're wanting like 5 times
Yeah,
the
keep it.
premium that I've been paying.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that.
Not doing it. Right, so why do it?
Something you and I talked about.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Something that
Get started here in about a minute.
Yes, yes.
So,
Yeah.
but anyway,
Okay.
I'll call you and
Okay,
we'll,
As soon
sounds
as
good.
Matt gets back.
but I want her to come in.
Yeah.
So she can
So you
understand.
Tom not.
Schaefer. Spaced it.
All right, I'll open up as from the council or joint meeting with the commissioners. First of all, do roll call of the council.
Matt Meredith.
Darren Older.
Mike Sprinkle?
Marilyn McCullough?
Mike Myers. And I thought Tom was coming, but Tom is not here. So that's it from the council side.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and call to order the Board of Commissioners meeting. Appreciate the council letting me sit with them. This is great, sitting next to such qualified elected officials for once.
Oh, gosh.
Let me roll up my pant legs.
I'm kidding.
We don't have hip waders on.
I know, I'm certain.
Something's coming.
I know, yeah. Exhaustion. So, all 3 commissioners are present. We'll send Tom Schaefer maybe a text and just to make sure that, he knows we're meeting, so excellent. So, meeting's called to order. Just a little bit of the, format of today's meeting. It's gonna be extremely flexible. The end in mind is to determine what direction do we need to go, because obviously we're hitting some, hurdles and with using the existing space. So, we're going to open up the meeting with RQAW, let them give their presentation. We're going to then open it up to the department heads. You can go in any order you want. We can go in alphabetical order according to last name. You can just jump up. I just want us all to be considerate of each other's time, so that all department heads can speak. And then the last part of the meeting is the council and the commissioners will then have an open discussion on what we feel is the best direction for the county. Because we've sliced and diced this as much as we can, and we got to figure out which way we need to go. So with that being said, if there's no other questions or feedback, I'll go ahead and open it up to the RQAW and Garmong team. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you, commissioners and council members, and thanks for coming out. We do want to give you an update of the schematic design phase of this project. One of the first things I wanted to do, though, is to kind of talk to you about the design process so that you have a good understanding of where we are right now in the process. And so you can kind of see where we've been and where we're headed. Because sometimes it makes a little bit of sense to sort of understand where we are and what information we've gone through and what is still ahead of us. So you can see from the pie chart, I guess that's me, huh? There we go. This represents the design process. And this smallest sliver, which is about 7% of the design process, is programming and planning. And for that phase, many of you may recall that we've gone through the courthouse, we've done a full assessment. That means that we've looked at the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. We've looked at the condition of the existing building and some of the challenges in terms of the ADA or American Disabilities Act, some of those challenges in terms of having turning radiuses and aisle widths, things like that. We also then, after we've done our assessment and looked at some of the challenges that the building yields, we then have been meeting with departments to understand what their needs are. So looking at what they currently need, what they currently have, and what their future needs may be. And we take all of that information and we compile it and we put it into what's called an architectural space program. And the space program allows us to take all of those square footages and compile them in a way that is easily understandable for all of us. Helps us to understand how many square feet do we need for this entire project to fit all of these departments in this existing building within those constraints. And it helped us to make some decisions about departmental allocation of space, etc. So that is this first segment, which it represents 7%. That's planning and programming. Schematic design, which is where we are right now, is the phase in which we sit down and we start to lay out some options for how we fit all of these spaces and all of these departments in that existing building. We also then work with engineers to start to understand what systems make sense, what is the height that we have in terms of being able to fit in ductwork and, you know, electrical conduit, etc. So it's sort of looking at this process from the 30,000 foot view, like looking at all of the departments, the entire building. We start to look at some options on the floor plans, and many of you we have met with and we've talked with you about your needs, and we, as a result of laying out several options, we then sat down with you and we talked through the floor plans and where we are in terms of schematic design. So that is, as you can see, in the entire design process, that's about 20%. So when we, at the conclusion of schematic design, when we have our floor plans laid out, relatively placed in the building, we then get into design development. And that is the phase where we really dig down into the details. As an example, we have located a checkpoint for security. But what we would do in design development is we would sit down with the security team, the sheriff, anyone who's in the Rule 19 committee with security, and sit down with them and work through options. So we would start to talk about camera placement, are panic buttons required, what is the secure access through the building, etc. So a lot of details that we start to dig into at that phase. And at the conclusion of that phase, after we've sat down with departments again, after we've gone through kind of the boring stuff in terms of door hardware, you know, for every door and things like that, after we've gone through interior selections, those initial selections, and worked through a lot of the decisions that happen in that design development phase, then we move into construction documents. And that is the phase where we actually take all of the information and all of the drawings and all of the specifications, and we compile them and we start to work at drawings that they can then, the contractor can construct from for Garmong. So in a way that makes sense to all of their subcontractors, there are certain conventions that we use in terms of drawings and specifications. That's the construction document phase. After that, bidding occurs, and that's when Garmong will get their final pricing and compile all of that, and then we move into construction. So that is the entire design process, and I want to make sure that you understand where we are in that process. Why is it not moving? Other side? Okay. So in terms of looking at the design of the overall building and what would be included in this project, there are some facade improvements such as tuck pointing and joint sealant, making sure everything is sealed and weatherproofed. We're looking at window improvements in terms of replacement due to the age of the windows. We are looking at new HVAC, plumbing, electrical work. We need to add some fire sprinklers and hopefully some security improvements, like I mentioned before, cameras, panic buttons, things like that. Of course, American Disabilities Act, we're looking for compliance in all areas of the building now, as well as interior renovations, some interior finishes, that kind of thing. So I'm going to have Jason and Lara kind of walk you through the floor plans so that you can get an idea of, you know, where we are with the departmental layout, square footage, that kind of thing. So.
So we're going to start with the lower level, or the first floor. We've located Adult Protective Services and the Prosecutor's Office in this floor. Adult Protective Services was added to the building with 3 private offices. We've increased the Prosecutor's Office by 45% square footage. Limited construction scope with limited demolition required in this floor. And we've added some staff restrooms. So the majority of this floor has remained as existing, and we're just kind of repurposing some of these spaces to try to save some of the budget money on that one.
Yeah, do you mind if I say something real quick? So we were tasked with by the council and the commissioners to, if you recall, in September we presented a couple different design options, some of which, actually I think all of which included additions. And so they asked us to, because there is quite a bit of vacant space in the existing courthouse, to study a design that only utilizes the existing space, no addition. So what we've done is we've produced a layout after working with all the departments and the task force around this design, gathering input, and this is the design that we've come up with. We'll go through each department laying out the benefits that we see, but there may be some downsides to this yet, and you know, what's that?
So some compromises to be made.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've produced a design that only utilizes the existing space. Is it the right decision for the county? That is not for us. That's not a decision that we or Garmon can make, and that's why we're here today. So we'll just lay out the design itself, and then it'll be up to the county to make that call.
And another thing to add is, as we go through these departments, you'll notice that as opposed to last time we presented, we have removed community corrections and CASA at this time. So you will not see those throughout these designs. But the other departments that were originally included are still included in this.
Yeah.
Next. All right, so on this first level, also we've included, you can see in the pink, the security checkpoint. So this would be at your main entrance, which is at the ramp. We would be forcing, I guess, traffic to go into this checkpoint before entering the rest of the building. So it's really isolating, creating a more secure building at that point. Then you would have your scanners in there before they're released into the rest of the building. And then also on this floor, we have the existing public restrooms, which might need some upgrades, but those would remain as is. We've also included on every level stacked IT rooms to help with that.
Moving up to the second floor plan, touching on probation first. Overall, there's a 44% increase in square footage for the department. There are now separate juvenile and adult lobbies, which is just a better process-wise. A dedicated drug testing restroom, an added private staff restroom, and a conference room that is outside of your office now. We were able to add a magistrate courtroom, which is not currently present in the courthouse, complete with a witness and reporter stand, holding cells directly accessible to the courtroom, and some admin space with now a private staff restroom for the magistrate and admin. Superior Court, overall a 67% square foot increase. The jury box and witness stand are now ADA accessible. Also holding cells with direct access to the courtroom. an attorney conference room dedicated to this court, and a dedicated jury room with an attached restroom. So now both courts do not have to share one jury room. Private staff restroom for the judge and his staff. Direct courtroom access from the judge's chamber and his staff. And then a public lobby which isolates the court staff from the public area for security purposes. And then overall improvements to the second floor include 2 single-use restrooms and, again, stacked IT rooms.
Circuit Court, we're moving on to the 3rd floor at this point. We have a 58% square foot increase. Jury box and witness stand ADA accessible. Holding cells with direct access to the courtroom. Attorney conference room dedicated to this court. Dedicated jury room with attached restroom. The private staff restroom that the judge and staff would share. Judge's chamber with direct courtroom access, and public lobby isolated from the staff space for security purposes. So this is close to identical of the other court. For the clerk and election, we have a 22% square foot increase. The public lobby is isolated from the staff space for security purposes again. We do have a dedicated conference room, a large open staff workspace, private staff restroom, and then we've included an election room which doubles as election storage or a voting center as well. Overall, for the 3rd floor, we do have, again, public restrooms. So those have been added on every floor. Stacked IT rooms. We have a building-wide break room attached with another staff restroom. And then another additional court-shared attorney conference room that could be shared for either courts or potentially as a conference room in general for the building.
Jeremy is going to talk a little bit about budget.
Hi, Jeremy Kuntz with Garmon Construction Services. We're construction manager as advisor for the project. As RQAW has worked through the program phase and the schematic phase concurrently while they're developing those documents, we are looking at the cost trends of the project and the main major components of the project. We've kind of broke out in this summary sheet. The subsequent sheet is going to have a detail cost estimate for the interior renovations, which that is a bulk of where all of the costs are. But the summary, we've had about $308,000 in exterior facade improvements. That's tuck pointing and washing, cleaning a lot of the existing limestone and fixing some problematic areas that were done in a study in the early programming phase, along with the exterior window replacement, about $615 grand. As you noticed in the design, a lot of the renovation is around the perimeter of the interior atrium. So obviously there is a covenant for that. We're not planning on any renovations there. But we are recommending carrying about a $100,000 allowance, knowing that there is probably going to be some things or areas that we may touch into that space that we aren't planning on the full detail of the estimate yet, of maybe patching a few terrazzo points or problem areas or fixing some handrails and some stuff that is in regards to that. There is no scope planned in that interior atrium, but we are recommending that we do have an allowance that does cover some of those areas of fixes or remediation and some of those, that historic component. And then from there, you'll see there's a $8.6 million line item that is for the major interior courthouse renovation. So we've taken the subsequent pages that I'll go to, we've taken by division and looked at all of the detail of the different construction line items of that interior renovation that Jason, Lara, and Rebecca just went through of all those departments. Counted studs, walls, drywall, new doors. The mechanical, electrical systems is one of the more major side cost impacts of the detail budget, and fire suppression systems, and went through that. That tallies a total with a design contingency, a owner's construction contingency, payment performance bonding. There is a 2.5% escalation rate that we're factoring right now from when this would bid at the completion of design in about another 4 to 5 months of design completion. That was a construction budget of $11.4 million. We then tallied what soft costs we were provided. That included the design cost, pre-construction cost, builder's risk insurance, third-party testing, advertisements for bids. We are carrying a 5% allowance for what we call FF&E, that is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So that's the chairs, trash cans, televisions, all of the loose furnishings that would fit out the court space and office space. And then the other large line item that's in the soft cost is interim relocation. So right now we're anticipating that the entire renovation plan is going to be in about a 16 to 18 month window. What that means is we would have some interim space for those county services to operate during construction. So our plan is knowing that we'd probably have the basement here available. This room itself, we would probably schedule with, as this is only obviously used for county functions and office meetings, that this could serve as a interim court. We would obviously have to work with everyone through scheduling to tackle that, and then knowing we'd have some expense to set up interim space for departments and everything to operate within the basement facility. So a lot of that detail of how that interim plan has yet to be worked out, and that tallies a total right now of the budget at $13,177,000. And then the subsequent sheets you have in your packet are that detailed breakdown of the interior renovations. So you see there's, I think, 4 more pages there that break down by line item and kind of the construction CSI format, the cost that put pen to paper on and arrived at for these items. Handful of the items right now are very early. You know, we don't have mechanical and electrical drawings yet. We do have narrative form detail helping us size and determine what the scope or intent is going to be from a narrative form. So we're using our cost trends and our history for similar or like projects to look at those from a cost per square foot perspective at this time.
And Jeremy, you've got asbestos removal. Is that included in one of these cost codes?
In an abatement section, yeah, we have it. Most of that is going to be lumped in with the mechanical systems. I guess, Nathan, that concludes the RQAW and then the Garmong budget side component, and I'll turn your meeting back over to you for discussion points then.
Sounds great.
And then we'll be here for any questions.
Sounds great. We'll go ahead and hear from the department heads, and probably just go in alphabetical order since I think everyone is here. So, because everyone has different points of contention, different, cost pluses that we need to consider. So, Lauren, if you want to step up to the podium and kind of lead us off, just your general feedback, any concerns you've got regarding your department. Everyone's been heavily involved.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pretty comfortable with what I'm getting in my office. I would like to see if the election room wall could be extended over, but that would still be part of our office. I just feel like that's probably not enough room for early voting with all the storage, but that would still be part of our office, so I'm comfortable with so far.
Super. That's a perfectly.
I don't know what else to say at this point. I may add later, but for right now, I'm comfortable with what I have.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Beth and Maria, if you guys want to both step up.
I would agree with Lauren. I'm pretty happy at this point with the space provided for probation. It works for us right as of now. And I would just kind of like to say that probation would like to stay with the courts. So, but as far as the drawings, we're happy with what we have with probation.
Okay.
I concur.
All right, excellent. It looks like I went out of order. Sorry. Alphabetically would have been Dan next, so my S and Bs look the same. All right, thanks, ladies. Dan, do you have any feedback?
Hello, friends. I want to start by saying that I think the clerk and probation should get less space, and then, no. I like what I have. I mean, I'm trying to be a partner. The basement works well for me. Whatever works in terms of that, but I'm also not really asking for a lot of additional costs. I can do it myself. So thank you for that. And my team's ready to work however you see fit. So thanks.
All right, thanks, Dan. Greg, you're next. And one of the big issues that the judges are encountering is obviously this magistrate, which is this brand new entity that we're trying to incorporate. So they definitely had the biggest challenge in this. So
Right.
so
Yeah,
Greg.
well, first of all, thanks everybody for the work we've done to date, but I don't think we are through slicing and dicing. I like the plans that we've gone through from the last meeting in December, but I want to see some other things. But when I asked can I have some drawings made, Nathan, you said something about exceeding the scope of a contract. I don't know what the scope of the contract was. I thought we were in a design phase, and I thought these folks, as my sister said as a teacher, one third grader called lawyers sewer people. I call them drawer people. So maybe these drawer people could give us move some things around. I guess what I'd like to see is maybe where I could get another afternoon or something that we could sit down and go, what if, and can you move this? And I don't know if your program's shareable, and other people access it and work and say, hey, how about this or that?
Create drawings?
Revit, you have Revit?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, what you use to create the drawings?
No, it's not really shareable.
Okay. But like I had Laura, get me a couple things so I could kind of see the old versus what we're talking about. And she was able to do that, I hope, in like probably 20 minutes or something. It'd take you 3 days, but I want to look at that. I know we talked about, stacking courts. We were talking about stacking courts. We were talking about an elevator, and we kind of want to stay away from an outside elevator, was the consensus or the guidance. I'd still like to see one just for the security purposes and what it does between the separation between public and criminal traffic and the juvenile traffic and that kind of thing. Yeah, but you're right, Nathan. The magistrate courtroom, as we've got it drawn, is just inadequate. I don't know, maybe we've not made this clear. We have a magistrate going on now called a referee that the county's given us. We are using the old commissioner's room as the auxiliary courtroom. Every time we meet, right now, that referee position is doing child support and small claims. When we get the magistrate, and we're getting the magistrate, okay? So 2 weeks ago, I got to go to a reception with the legislators and the justices, the chairs of the committee that Judge Sebecki and I testified before in September, said we were good to go. Went to a meeting in December, the IJA, the Indiana Judges Association, Chief Justice said, yep, you're good to go. There is a bill pending right now in the House that the chair of that committee, Representative Torr, and then Senator Brown sent in. So we are on the list. We're going to get a magistrate. A magistrate is a full-time judicial officer. It's a third court, okay? So it's got to be a functioning courtroom. If you've ever been there on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, not only do we have criminal court going on in Superior Court, and then Thursdays I got Chin's Court. They're doing child collection on one day. They're doing small claims on the other. The rotunda, the lobby there gets filled with people and noise and loud. We need more than just one row of 5 chairs, going, what was that, north and south? So that's got to be a little longer. And I know everybody went through and kind of gave us a restroom and for those offices, and we talked about we need an administrative office for at least 2 people because we're each going to have a court reporter assigned to cover the magistrate position. But I mean, we just got to approach it that it's going to be a third court. It's going to be busy, and that may be as early as July 1st. It's going to start July, if depending on when they sign the bill to become effective, and when we get the spot filled. So. that north-south configuration smaller, that's not gonna work. We gotta get people, we'll have to get people out, you know. And Judge will talk about this, I think, a little more, but he's doing initial hearings and they just bring people over from the jail and there's, you know, 3 males and a couple females. That means there's those folks, some of their family, there's gonna be jailers with them, a male and female at least, from the sheriff's department. So there's all your chairs and all your room taken up. Everybody else is gonna be out in the hall making noise and disrupting things, so that's not gonna work, space-wise. Also, I just kind of would like to see if we could maybe get together between now and the next couple weeks and go, can you guys move this? And remember the drawings we had where we had the one court over, I think where probation's gonna be in these drawings? And look at that again and see how that fits. Is that doable?
Have those drawings.
Yeah.
In regards to, like, what can you
Well,
further explain what you're talking about?
One of the drawings we had, and this was some time ago, we had both courts on the same floor, but, you know, opposite sides of the building, kind of doing the same thing. So we'll kind of look at that kind of configuration and moving those. I just don't, I like the drawing on the circuit court part, except I wanted to also, I think I sent a message saying, can we move the judges' chambers over to where you have the staff part now? I just want to see how that would work and how that looks. Because you're talking about, in circuit court now, there's 2 restrooms. They're gone in these drawings. If that's something that you can do, or is it feasible to save those? Is it better to save those, or is it just better to start over and do what you're doing? But
yeah, we tried to move the office, but due to the size of it, when we moved it to whatever orientation, it split your court reporters to opposite corners.
court reporters would move up to where the chambers is.
Yeah, that's what we tried. I think I may have emailed Dean on that.
But I didn't get that tried.
Well, Dean's the one that asked me for it, Judge, so that's who I sent.
Well, I asked somebody. Did I ask you on that? No, I was asking about moving that too, because I want to see.
I don't recall
Well, if
that.
we do this, but anyway, those are my concerns, and I just wanted to see if we can slice and dice just a little bit more on some of those,
Sure.
and then go from there. But you know, the others, I don't know. Lauren, I'd rather see the election room somewhere else, maybe over here permanently. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that would free up some space. So, but that's the clerk's decision. So on the circuit court end and the magistrate end, those are my thoughts.
So just a quick question, and then we'll probably have more questions as a group. How many days a week are you in court?
5 days a week.
So you have court session Monday through Friday?
I have court sessions every day.
Okay, sure.
Now, in my end, because I do domestic and family and I do civil litigation, I may have a jury trial set and it gets continued. So then I got to fill it with other stuff. But I'll have, you know, Chin's days is a full day, domestic relations, modification, support, all that, that's another full days. I don't have a lot of criminal, those, Judge Specky's got almost all that. So,
Okay.
But I also have the referee right now is only under circuit court and only doing small claims that from my court. Superior Court still has a small claims docket that will go to the magistrate along with some criminal docket.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Judge, quick question. We talked about the referee and the magistrate. Looks like we're going to get here this summer, maybe as early as July. Where does the referee fit into? Will they operate out the same court as the magistrate? Are they going to be somewhere else? Or?
The referee position will go away.
It'll go away,
Because
okay.
it's county funded. It's something that we did from 2013, I think was the first year it got it started. Because it was, well, Dan and I got together and we came over and asked for it because it helped child support collection, because they can devote way more time with the referee doing that. And we were also able to take some of the small claims backlog off the Superior Court by putting some of that over there, because I took some of that on. I was doing it before. Judge was doing it on his court, so the referee handled some of that. But the referee just being a county position and the statutes that I could use, because I was doing the sports stuff was all in my court, I could access those. And we got some federal reimbursement, and we'll continue to get the federal reimbursement for the support cases, even with the magistrate. But We want to be able to take more of the backlog off and just have 3 operating courts. The state does a magistrate because it's a full-time judicial officer, but kind of the gamemanship, I guess you call it, is they're not paid the same as a judge, but they have all the same authority and duties of the judges as assigned by the courts they work for. So you'll see it a lot in larger counties. They get magistrates in rather than asking the legislature for a full court. But that's the difference. But it is, for all intents and purposes, it's another judge, it's another full court. And in 10 years, that may turn into another Superior 2 or something, so.
Sure. All right, thank you. I'm sure we'll have some more questions at the end.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments. Dean?
I know we've heard a little bit of a historical perspective, and I want to go through at least about a minute of that myself. I can remember going out to the county meetings when we talked about building this building. And we talked about building that in conjunction with fixing the building across the street. So I've always seen this as a kind of unified enterprise. We've all hit bumps in the road, and there's been long periods of time that we wish hadn't taken place. But the reason that I say that is I still think, looking at the space that we have available, I'm still looking at it as a unified system. When the architects came up with the plans that had additions, we had a underground parking thing, and I think those got dismissed early on just because of the cost. Rough estimates. Obviously, we hadn't done all the kind of work we'd done. So we started looking at, my understanding was the space that we had over there and the space that we still had over here. I don't know if that's still the issue, if we still have space. Obviously, we have space in the basement. Obviously, we are going to need that for interim purposes. But whether or not we need that for permanent purposes is something that I think seriously needs to be looked at. We started this meeting by opening it formally with the council and the commissioners and taking roll, because we need to do things certain ways. And so I do want to kind of point out a piece of procedure here is Judge Smith and I, the courts are not departments of the county. They're a separate political branch completely. So we're not a department. All of you have spent a lot of time on this, along with me. Nathan and I spent a couple hours over at his office just last week going over these things. When they talked about doing a survey, I took them around to every part of this courthouse, upstairs, down in the basement, all the way around, a couple hours when they did that. I think everybody's really working hard. I'm not sure that everybody understood that the magistrate is a full-time position. I've told several folks we don't have how the work's going to be divided up agreed yet. We don't have a person that's agreed to take the job. My sole job requirement so far is that the magistrate will not work less hard than I work. Because we are getting a magistrate, and we're going to be full speed with the magistrate because of our caseload. Senators involved in this, the House representatives, the representatives from the Supreme Court have all agreed to that, and we're not the only ones. There's several other counties that are going to get those. And I always say, I believe it when I see it signed, but we have every indication that we're going to get that. Sometimes it's hard for me when I look at just a written plan to kind of visualize things, and I know that can be hard for other folks as well. I've kind of roughly looked at the room we have here. I know it has 94 seats according to plan. I have zero idea whether there's 94 chairs in here. But the magistrate courtroom, as it's drawn up now, is carved out of the current commissioner's room that everyone's familiar with. It would go approximately from just midway through Mr. Spillman there on the front row, back to the wall, and up to the edge of this podium. That's how big it is. Now, we got to put a bench in. It's got to be handicapped accessible, like your bench doesn't have to be anywhere near this big, anywhere near as big as the one that I've got, which is 15 feet tall, and has to have a court reporter position, has to have a position for a security, which would be the two people sitting over there from the auditor's office. Has to have 2 tables for counsel, has to have a witness stand where somebody can sit, has to have at least space to put people in the courtroom because they're public hearings, the parties, the attorneys. And if we are truly planning this to be for the next 50 years, I don't think that it's good to start out having the courts themselves crowded beyond use, which I'd say that room right there is too small. When I had looked at the courthouse itself, I had sort of made the assumption that we would just use the commissioner's room as a third courtroom. And then the space that's needed there, the office space, would be kind of built around that. If we are looking at, I think we're at the point where we need to actually work some more with the architects, because I don't want to sign off on anything, and I know it's up to you guys to fund it, and I know it's up to you guys to authorize things. I'm not ready to start out at the space we are right now. Did we get an increase in our space? Well, some of you came over with me the last time we had a meeting and looked at all the things in our courtroom, so we needed more space. Obviously, we've added a jury room and a accessible jury box to the 2 existing courtrooms, which causes there to be more square footage. The current design still has the judge's offices as a hallway to get into the courtroom. So the court reporters will go through our office. We'll go through our office. If there's a senior judge or a special judge, they'll go through our office. Now, I was given 2 options there when we looked at it, and I like the one that we have now better than the first one, much better. But that's one of those design tweaks, and that's why I had asked about, hey, what would happen if we moved this back? And I had my little cardboard cutouts that I had to move around on the, and I don't believe I ever saw a plan. I got a text from you saying it messed up the workflow. I'd like an opportunity to at least see it and see whether would I be comfortable in having part of my staff over the side here and another part there. But we haven't done that. Are there space savings that I believe might be still squeezed out? Depends on what you guys want to do. I think that there is a decent reason for having voting over here, as opposed to having everybody that wants to vote go through a metal detector and a search of their person. There's some guidelines about that. They have exceptions for courthouses. I believe that there may be some space available in some of the departments. I'm not going to go into the weeds on that. I know the other departments are happy. I think the last plan had maybe 14 workstations for the clerk's office and a conference room. I don't know if there's some room to be squeezed out there. So I think that we have done good work. I think there needs to be some additional planning to make sure we don't start out, in my opinion, putting the courts behind the 8 ball and not having the right amount of work. And I do want to emphasize that just because Judge Smith and I talk about how work is divided right now, doesn't mean that any court, any judge from now on is going to be able to divide it that way, or want to divide it that way. So I think it's important that we are designing court space, not necessarily superior court space and circuit court space. Because if someone else becomes a judge and they have conflicts with old cases, they're going to have to take different new cases on. And you have to maintain flexibility. You cannot design this building around just what's happening in the court system this year or next year. It has to be flexible. And the job itself, I know we've had some operations questions. And I'm certainly willing to entertain those. Operations of the court is the court's business. But, for example, this morning I did 5 hearings before I came over here. All of those folks were unrepresented, but I had 9 people in my courtroom. Would they fit in the magistrate courtroom? Barely. I think they have 9 seats all stuffed together on one wall. When they bring people over from jail, this Monday I had 5, which meant that there were, in this particular case, 1 female, 4 males, male jailer, female jailer, sheriff's deputy, then my staff. Thursday before, it was 10 people from jail. And all of them can bring people in to watch the proceedings as well. Can you stagger those things out? Well, for one thing, you don't know. I don't know who's going to be arrested, and no one else is going to know who's going to be arrested over the weekend or without warrant during the week. So the total number of those folks coming over and when they come over is not controllable by scheduling. We schedule out a time. They're going to come over at 10 o'clock in my courtroom. But to micromanage it past that wouldn't be possible. And I would suggest to you as you go through these things that we would want to maintain flexibility in where things can be scheduled and where judges, magistrates in the future can schedule those as well. And I just don't think that we are at that point. Now, I do want to address a couple other things. We have these ongoing, and I'll look at the material that was presented in regards to budget. We do have ongoing maintenance issues that need to be taken care of, and I want to be clear about all that stuff and where we are. If we get a magistrate July 1st, we're going to put them to work, and we're going to put them to work in the space that we have. And I'm going to continue to work where I've been working for the last 20 years, in a hallway between my court reporters who are split now, and that's why I'd like to see that design myself. They're split now, and they're split now because that was the fastest, most efficient way I could put another court reporter into the space we had 20 years ago so I could serve the people of this county and get their cases through and get all that work done. We'll continue to do that, and I'm sure you guys are all going to continue to work on this system as well. So the only thing that I'm saying is the plan that we have right now is not adequate for the courts, and it's not adequate because of the space needs of the magistrate who is just a 3rd courtroom. I have said 50 times, if I've said it once in meetings with all of you individually and in public, what we needed were 2 courtrooms with a jury box and jury rooms and 1 courtroom without. And that's still what I think. And the attendant office space for the staff to run those things. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sure, thank you. All right, so that's kind of everything they've shared is information we've heard and try to make revisions on. And if you could step up to the podium, that'd be great.
I just wanted to make a quick comment on the judge's thoughts on election. I can certainly see how, from the outside looking in, that would be perfect to have election down here because there's a lot more room and for voting purposes, et cetera. But it would be a nightmare as a clerk to have an election room in a separate building. And the main reason, well, there are a couple reasons, but one of the big reasons is I only have one full-time election person, and she's not gonna be there forever, obviously. Neither, none of us are. So when it comes time to train somebody else, how do you train somebody from a different office, a different building? And election is a little bit different. It's not repetition like most jobs. It's a 6-month cycle. So to get somebody through a 6-month cycle is one time of doing each thing. And how comfortable do you feel with somebody running an election when they've done something one time? So, and it would have to be, I mean, the clerk would have to be able to hear that person all the time. The way the design is here, the election is a separate room, but I had asked for that wall to be moved over a little bit and have a door there and have, instead of a conference room on that side, that would be the clerk's office so that they can hear, because there are constant phone calls coming in from the public wanting to know election questions. And there's a lot of information to election. It would be hard for, especially somebody new, let alone a veteran person, to be able to answer all those questions. So the clerk needs to be able to hear those comments, to be able to make sure that the answers are correct. And again, from a separate building, it would just be a total nightmare. If there were more employees in election, it would be a little bit different because then you've got somebody to back off of you. But like that person's gonna have lunches, who's gonna cover lunch? Is somebody gonna have to walk over to the other building and cover their days off? And it would just be challenging. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Great, thank you. All right, council, commissioners, questions? And yeah, if I can just say this one time, if you want to talk, please step to the microphone because everyone at home or in bed, we had to get Mike Grant out of bed because the video wasn't working. And poor guy had to come in. So if you could talk in the microphone, great. Thank
I
you.
wasn't sure when I first came up here if this would be the time to bring this up or not, but I have heard that there's a possibility of moving, probation permanently over to this building in the basement. I came over yesterday and looked at it, and it would not work for probation. I think we need to remain with the courts as far as we work with them closely. We work with the prosecutor's office closely. So I think it would benefit probation to remain in the courthouse with the courts. The other concern I had was security. There's no way out. There's 2 main doors when you walk in. And then there's 2 main doors off to the left, and then there's 1 door back this way. We could get out that door and get to a stairwell, or else we have to come out and go clear over here, get to a stairwell. At this time, there's absolutely no security in that building at all. We do not deal with, some people are very upset when they come to see us. They take out what the judge does to them on us. And it's just a big concern as far as that is
Okay,
worked out. So I think I just wanted to get that out there. So
thank you, appreciate that. Or just, open it up, and again, this is just gonna be a dual feedback, back and forth discussion here, so. Darren, Matt, myself, and Tom have obviously been intimately involved with this for a lot of it. Open it up.
Tom's watching.
Oh, Tom is watching, okay.
If we look at everything that's been said, how many square feet are we talking about needing?
Well, that was the notes I was taking down, and because in the actual magistrate courtroom, I mean, we have several of the components that Dean laid out. The concern we have is for the audience and the admin staff, the court reporters. The way we currently have it laid out, when that person goes to 2 court reporters, which could be immediately, one of them would have to reside in one of the judge's office space. And that was kind of the thought that we had, because we can't have a office with a conference table. You know, we just moved it around as much as we can. So if I can sum up what the judges are saying is that there needs to be more public space in the magistrate courtroom, and there needs to be more space for office staff. Is the two?
I think that is fair. That So prior to this cycle, I had 4 court reporters. The council listened to the information about the magistrate, and they granted me a 5th. My plan is to have them trained up. Now, I did steal another trained court reporter, but we're running low on those from other counties, so that we'd be able to hit the ground running. But I would anticipate that, you know, you're going to be up to 3 court reporters for them, and at some point in time as well. So it becomes an issue a little bit of which department. We've heard complaints about, well, we don't want to be separated, and we don't want to be separated, and then we're going to separate court staff member from the person that's in charge and doing their paperwork and those things. So there are some issues there. We do a lot more electronically. We transfer records electronically. We're not in the clerk's office near as much. It used to be a multi-times a day going back and forth just carrying paper files, and we don't do that. But there is efficiency, clearly, and I agree completely with the clerk. If you're going to train somebody, you need to be with them to train them. There are ongoing questions that go on, but that would be similar in our system as well. I've talked about whether my staff would be better off with small offices for the quiet, considering the amount of work that they have to do, but how much you would sacrifice in that ability to immediately communicate with each other like we're doing here, as opposed to sending an email or getting on the intercom or doing whatever. So
in regards to Commissioner Arnold's question, right now we have 10 seats that are somewhat squeezed in that magistrate, and no one's denying that we're trying to make the best use of this, trying to make this work, but it's got to, like I told the judges earlier, if they're not bought into this plan, when we think about relocation and moving, if the department heads aren't aligned with this project, it's going to be an utter disaster. So that's one reason we're here today. So currently there's 10 seats in that magistrate public viewing section. How many seats would you feel would be appropriate? And Greg, please joining.
Looked at it again this morning, and if we kept the east-west configuration of the, you know how the benches, everybody's been there, right? So you know how the benches are. You might get by with that last bench and that area towards the bookcases not being part of it, but you're going to need at least that, because you can go down there on a small claims day. There's going to be people at the table. There's going to be people waiting. Some represented, most not. They'll be there with somebody, 2 or 3 other people, witnesses, family members, moral support. Those things are almost always full. Same thing with child support days. There's going to be people waiting. There's going to be attorneys and their clients waiting in line to get up to the table to have their hearing. So you're going to need more than the 10 chairs. Now, if the magistrates
We'll throw down a number. I mean, 15. I mean, and I'm not holding you to that number. We got to have something to shoot for.
Well, I've seen 25 and 30.
What do you think?
On support days, and so if a few of them waited out in the hall and you had 15, 20 people in there, you need seating for that. Sure.
15 to 20.
Yeah, 25. We also use that for
25.
Well, I'd say 20. Plan for 25 to 30, because that's your busiest days. Now it may not be.
So you need more room in there than you need in your courtrooms? Because you don't have 25 to 30 in your courtrooms, and I'm not interrogating.
From what we're doing right now, it's like the seating in circuit court.
We've got 30 according to the architects
here. In our courtrooms? So there's 30 seating?
30 in each court, yeah.
Where that is indispensable is when we have jury trials, because that's where you bring the extra jurors and you put some in the box and you've got to go through all those. So. Now, I will say, because I do, as Jen said, we're not going to be here much longer, right? I mean, I've got about 25 years left. So there's going to be another judge at some point in time. They're going to assign things different. They're going to amend the local rules to allocate caseloads a little bit different. So you don't know who's going to be doing what, but if that's why we were saying 2 courtrooms, 2 jury boxes, and 2 jury rooms, 1 courtroom without. And that works good, and that'll, in my opinion, work good for the next 20, 30 years, depending on what happens, depending on who's judge and what's going on in the county.
I do want to add something to that. When we talk about the seating, so now if I have a jury trial, let's say it's a child molesting trial, so I'm going to call 120 jurors because nobody's going to want to sit on it and everybody's going to have an excuse, and I don't know how many Amish and Mennonites are going to be called out to begin with and have religious exemption requests. In the old days, I would use the commissioner's room to seat some of those if you guys weren't meeting, and we always started them on Tuesdays, and that was kind of a thing. Right now, we're using some of the space that we have available to stage those folks, to have them watch their orientation video, and then call them up in groups up to the courtroom to decide whether they're going to sit on a jury. We're going to be losing that space, and in essence, when you have 3 courts running, there are times when we'll just have more people in the courthouse. So you know the limited seating that we have in the gallery around the top and the limited seating we have in the atrium. Some of those folks just sit, like in the small claims, they'll watch the first 2 or 3. I know we've all seen Judge Judy, or at least while we were clicking trying to get out of that programming. People sit and watch those things. And I would say this as well. The public being able to see what we do, particularly in the adult court, not juveniles, not chins, is an important part of this proceedings, even if it's only 5 people. And it's something that we want to preserve somewhat to do that. So in adding the 3rd courtroom, we're losing some jury staging space in all of these plans. That's just part of the deal, but it's worth the trade to me, and I believe to any future judge, to have that 3rd courtroom and that 3rd judicial officer.
And there may be things, with the magistrate, at least we're thinking, I believe that it's going to have some criminal caseload. The magistrate can try a case. I mean, so the magistrate may be presiding over some jury trials, something that's been on their docket. That means they're going to have to move around. They're going to go to one of the other courtrooms, and that court's going to go down to that courtroom. So they've got to be functional and exchangeable in that sense.
So in the case of interviewing jurors like that, if you know you're going to be interviewing quite a few on that specific day, could we not set up some extra chairs or something just to handle a temporary situation?
We've done that repeatedly. So we've set them up down in the basement, and then we've got people walking through there. Everybody, if it's a voting time, then we got to set them up in the main floor, and we've done that as well. It is possible.
But it's doable.
It is possible to do it. We've done it many times, just because with 100 people coming in or more, the commissioner's room was too small.
Last year, we had jury trials going at the same time, which we tried to avoid. Judge had a criminal case that required you to have like 75 to 100 people called in. I had 65, so we had them, out in the main entryway. We had them on the old recorder's office and back in the chairs. We had them in the commissioner's room waiting. So it was quite the.
So you can. It is possible. And just to be clear, when we're talking about having 25 or 30 seats in the current courtroom configurations, we can put 30 jurors in, potential jurors in those seats, another 12 or 14 if we have that many alternates in the jury box. The reason that I haven't done that is if you get somebody that wants to be a complete horse's rear end and wants to say horrifying things about why they don't want to be a juror and why they hate the entire system and how this person's guilty, I could lose 35 people in a fell swoop.
You can dismiss him early.
Well, once they've said something, it's like unringing that bell. Once they've said something in front, and I've had it happen where they're kind of just educating people on, this is what I need to say now to get out of being on a jury. So that's why I've split them up, but I've done it both ways, and we're going to have to adapt as we go forward.
I can see that as an ongoing issue, that no matter, unless you've got separate rooms, you can lock them in, and then when you call them in.
And I'm not asking for a separate jury staging room. Some courthouses, federal courthouses, have that as part of their design. This is where the jury comes in. But in really big cities, really big court systems, they have potential jurors sitting there every day. You get called in as a potential juror, you may be there for a week, and then the courts just decide, oh, we're gonna try this today, we need 20 people from the jury pool,
Yeah.
let's pull them up to our, well, we don't do it that way, and never will.
And that's gonna be something that what we can certainly work through, but the judges in the future will have to work through, and if they
Right.
have to put chairs in the hallway again, they'll do that.
We've got experience in doing that.
This is kind of off the space issue we're talking about, but it is part of the space issue. What about video conferencing? What do you envision? What's gonna happen down the road where we don't have to bring so many people in all the time, like for hearings and stuff, that we can do it on site with video?
All right, so the courts in general have a rule against cameras in the courtroom unless it's specifically approved by the Supreme Court. During COVID, we got special permission to where we could use Zoom hearings. There are some judges that have continued to do that. We've been warned twice now by the Chief Justice of the Indiana Supreme Court that everybody needs to get their butts back in court and start holding business in court. So there are some things that we can do by video. Quite frankly, doing initial hearings by Zoom from our courthouse to the jail was horrible. It would take sometimes 25 minutes to get an invitation by email from my courtroom over to the jail. And then we had the worst connections between those two. If we did that, to do initial hearings so we weren't having to bring people over for all those hearings, I would want a closed circuit system, a dedicated system for doing those hearings from our jail. In practical matters, as far as communicating with prisons in our state, Illinois is horrible. Ours is hit and miss on getting prisoners to where they need to be so we can have the hearing when it's scheduled. Kentucky is the best, but I've only done 2 in Kentucky, trying to save some travel expenses for the sheriff. But there are certain hearings on a criminal standpoint that just cannot be done. They have to be in person. If somebody's going to plead guilty or be sentenced on a felony that's going to send them away for 20 years, they need to be in my courtroom. So I'd be more than happy to look at a video system between us and the jail.
Mike, let me say this, though. Because of COVID, the rules, the administrative rules been amended to show that you can continue to have remote proceedings like video, Zoom, Teams, as long as there's good cause shown, somebody files a motion ahead of time and you find it. Some cases, like some of the criminal, you can't do that on. I do some, that's what I was doing this morning. I was setting up some. Martin County is currently in a pilot project that was sponsored by the Supreme Court to see how they would do. They were doing almost all their hearings by Zoom for a period of time. So that's here to stay, but it's the exception, it's not the rule. And we hope that when we get this done and we get, because as you guys know, because I've approved, or at least the council did, some potential funding to upgrade our equipment that's going its last legs. We're talking about getting the capabilities for better video conferencing and holding hearings that way. And I will tell you this, the statistics have shown all along that it takes more time to do video hearings. It takes more time to get them done because just the mechanics of it, getting them set up, getting the people on, the way you have to conduct the hearings, you know.
My concern is when Gary has to send 2 deputies to Lake County to bring a guy back for a 5-minute hearing, and then those 2 deputies or 2 others have to take him back. And if it's a day like tomorrow when we don't know what the weather's gonna be, I would really like to see us incorporate that technology. And if we have to get you better equipment, I think we can probably splurge and get some better equipment here to make that happen.
So it's not just an equipment issue. There are times where the law just says they need to be in court. There are times when people are so recalcitrant representing themselves that you want to get them in person and on the record, so they're not appealing something later on saying that I didn't understand this, I didn't understand that, you didn't say this, you didn't say that. I'm more than happy to have better equipment. If you would get Michigan City to have people show up when they're supposed to show up for a hearing, I'd be happy if you could arrange that too.
It's a very important topic. I'm gonna kind of pull that tangent
Right,
back in
right,
just a
right.
little bit.
And I want to say this too, just real
please,
quickly, Nathan, about when we were talking about spacing and potential jurors, and, you know, the one thing we learned from COVID is it hits you, that this may not be the last thing that comes around, and you have to have the space. We know we had to set jurors 6 feet apart, so that triples the space requirement you'd have for something like that. So hopefully that's the last pandemic, but it probably won't be.
Yeah.
All right. Any other?
I mean, I asked about how much space is needed. I'm not sure I got the answer. It looks like you 1,300 Sperry Court magistrates now 550. So are you looking at another 500 square foot of space you need for the magistrate court? You don't need the jury box?
My thoughts on it are, you can take the existing commissioner's room, maybe get some off the back, but as long as it's still going east and west, you know, the referee office space is to the east side of that. That could be incorporated if the other court's not gonna be there. That's why I was saying, I'd kinda like to look back at those other drawings where we moved the one court, moved the other offices. That might be doable a lot easier.
Sounds like there's some tweaking that needs to be done.
Right.
Well, perhaps. I mean, basically, there are currently 10 seats. The Circuit and Superior Court have 30. So theoretically, if we can magically make square feet appear, we can get 30 seats and 3 court reporters, then I think we're good. Problem is, as much as we worked on this, someone's gonna have to lose that square foot.
So, you know, we talked a little bit about options if we need more space and moving people. I said we could put new court in the basement, we could put the clerk in the basement, we could put the prosecutor's office in the basement, we could put the probation department in the basement. Those are our choices if we were gonna move departments or parts of departments out. Same thing goes if we're gonna try to get the square feet that I think we need to have a functioning court system, then the folks that just came in and say, I'm perfectly happy with all the space I've got, are gonna have to give up some space, because there's only X amount of square feet available in the building. And
Yeah, and we evaluated that, and the challenge is putting the court's office down in the basement, and it's spit out. It's just not practical for the court. So it's, you know, we may have extra square foot in one pocket or the other, but if it's not contiguous to your courts, it's just not conducive.
Well, are we at a point in the pie slices that we can still look at these other drawings and go, like, if we move this here and do that in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then
Yeah,
get back?
I think we can. I definitely think we can. I mean, and we're certainly not to the end where today's the drop dead date. But we're getting close to where we're redoing things that we've done a couple of months ago, and we're just starting to kind of go down a rabbit hole we may have went down, you know, a year and a half ago, and then realized, and we just forgot what the hurdle was. So I think to Ron's point earlier, you know, the fact that we know we need more capacity for the public space, we need to try to reorient your guys' offices and your chambers, and that we need more space for court reporters, because you guys want your office reoriented down in the corner, right?
Yeah, I want to see it.
100%. So yeah, I wanted to get you a quick answer. They did it live, and it clearly was going to cost. So I got you a quick answer. We can definitely do that. That's easy. But if we can find a way to wave the magic wand, because when we talk about moving departments to the basement, and we go through the 5 list, there's none that's going to have more net benefit than net negative. Because, I mean, I for one don't want probation in the annex basement to mix that clientele with the non-judicial clientele. I don't think it's a smart long-term strategy. The clerk, we bounced around that idea. We can't necessarily move one of the courts there, because that's impractical, because you guys cross-pollinate a lot. Don't want to move the prosecutor because they have a space that really doesn't need touched a whole lot. So from a cost standpoint, that's challenging. So my hope is at some point maybe we can squeeze out some more square footage here and give you practical workspace, because that has to be the end result, is practical workspace. And then if and when it doesn't, I mean, this is just Nathan Gabhart talking, you know, eventually the probation will have to leave the courthouse at some point, and maybe join community corrections somewhere. And that could be a whole another ball of wax that I don't even know right now. But I can't move you guys out, right? And I can't move the prosecutor out and say I, meaning we. So that's kind of where my mind is going, that really probation is the rate limiting step, that if we have to get rid of an office, I think that's probably the only one that's going to be less worse on your operations.
We looked at one of those older drawings recently. We were talking about like flipping one of the courts over. It seemed like it gave them a little bit more room. And it was moving probation. But it would make the magistrate's room work. Maybe the offices on the other side where they are now. That would not no longer be a courtroom over that way coming into it. So, I mean, there's a couple things we could tweak and look at.
Yeah, sure, sure.
And because we'd always talked about, at one time having not just the 3 courtrooms, but maybe having a hearing room for the senior judges and coming in, or the special judges coming in, so they don't have to walk the office. I asked to get rid of a wall in one of the drawings on ours, because I don't care if it's me in the court, me, and a court reporter going through my office right that way into the courtroom. That was fine.
Yeah.
Somebody else may not like that, but that's just part of the workflow. So, yeah, I'd kind of like to see us try to move those things around, maybe take a look at that, and then say, yes, it's feasible, or no, it's not.
Now, I will say this. So, I asked for that little tweak, and I'd like to see it. It may be, but the way I'm thinking about this right now, we're talking about a chunk of space that's the courtroom and the offices. And so I don't think anything I'm talking about right now is talking about expanding that more. It's just trying to figure out where.
It's a reconfiguration.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've got my court staff separated. Half of them are on one side of me. Well, 3/5 are on one side now, 2/5 are on the other side. So I'm not totally against that idea. I just like to see it.
Yeah, there's no question.
For your guys' space in the drawings right now is adequate, you think, for what you need? Just bigger a little bit.
I think there's some little tweaks. We have to realize, so the jury room, for instance, our current jury room has a men's restroom and a women's restroom. The women's restroom's real funky. You couldn't get anybody in there on a wheelchair or even, not sure, a cane or anything. The new system just has one restroom, so 12 or 14 people, when we take breaks, it's going to take longer. It's going to be less efficient, but okay, I mean, that is what it is, and it's not like we have a jury trial every week. So, and I do want to emphasize this too, if people are wondering, we use the jury rooms for other things now. Other rooms for taking depositions and having conferences with clients. And we intend to still do that. We just have to make sure we have lockable doors, so when they come in to do a deposition that doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in court, they can use it. So we're not setting out this space and just saying nobody ever walk in here and use it until we need to break the seal and have another jury trial.
And guys, eventually, we've said this before, I think you all know this, but eventually we have to submit whatever these drawings are, or plans, to the Supreme Court folks to see if it complies with their security requirements.
Yeah, and that's one thing we've done internally is run it through our QAWs, court experts in their divisions, but then we'll need to get that stamp by the state too.
Currently, we do not have a security plan on file because we've told them this is coming, and
We're waiting on this.
been good enough to say, okay, we'll wait.
And I will say this, the article that came out in the paper said only 22 counties. We have a lot more security now than lots of places. We just didn't submit the plan because we were thinking, why do that? And then we reconfigure and get another plan in. And quite frankly, the plan that we have moves the security checkpoint out towards the edge of the building, which is safer for everybody in the building as well, so.
I guess if one high-level question I've got for the council and the commissioners is right now, theoretically, if we can realign these last couple of things and make the existing space work, it's $13.1 million. Is that acceptable? I mean, I don't know how to phrase that. I mean, it's. most necessary things, or I'm not sure what our options are, but what do you guys think about?
I'm not sure there's any recourse or any option on that.
So in that 13 million, can I ask, if somebody said this is what the courtroom's gonna look like, or these are the materials that are gonna be in it, are we price, is that what we're pricing?
Yeah, Judge, we planned on similar wood finishes like this, carpets. Average Indiana county courtroom. So wood benches, jury boxes.
Average?
The normal, yeah, the normal.
All right, I just wanna know what you're
Yeah.
looking at.
Conservative.
Conservative.
That's a better term.
And in that number is up to $4 million of renovations that we have to do anyway. So just for the audience at home, out of that 13 million, that's not, well, 4 million of that approximately has to be done even if we do nothing to the renovations, so
Regardless.
regardless, so.
Probably talking about what,
You know, the
back, the top
outside
pointing, the
windows.
windows, yeah.
Sure, we'd like to see lesser numbers, but we've got a lot of issues that we're dealing with here, trying to get people happy and satisfied in what they need.
Efficient.
And I haven't talked to anyone that is in favor of adding on to the building over there. Everyone that I've talked to in the community has said, I don't want to build onto there. If we can get it, what we need done within the premises that we have, I could live with the estimate on the remodel job. And that's the question you asked, so
Yeah,
I think I can live with it.
Mike, come on.
After hearing what the judges have had to say, the department heads and so forth, and looking at this, I don't know that we could really meet all the requirements and all the things we need over there and find a way to cut a couple of million from it. I mean, I don't really think this is an extravagant plan. Certainly, it's not including, like Mike said, it's not, not including adding on to the building, and I think we'd like to definitely try to avoid that. Because I remember the plans that they did several years ago when we first kind of started this conversation. And I think one of the plans had adding on to the building, and it was gonna be $20 million. And that's probably $25 million today, 9 years later, 10 years later, so. Yeah, I'm comfortable with it. I think we're gonna have to do something, and this seems like if we can make it work with what they've talked about, why?
Thank you, Judge. Marilyn?
I would agree. I like the idea of keeping it all within the walls we have currently instead of building on. And I think if we can accomplish that, let you guys look at that a little more to see what you can do with the space that we have. I think that's the best option. You know, we've been talking about this for how long? So it's time to actually move on and to get it done.
Darren?
Yeah, no, I just, from a cost standpoint, I mean, we're gonna be paying this building off for a while, and from a debt load of the county, I don't see us, I don't believe it's good to go much any higher than what we've got as far as the estimate on this. I'd like to see it a little cheaper, just ideally in my mind, I've always had that $10 million target number with the maximum of about 12 is what I've always envisioned it being. If we could stay at that point, I think that would, from a debt load standpoint for the county, that would keep us fairly in pretty good shape. As far as the plan too, again, just aesthetically and from a historical standpoint, I really never have liked the idea of adding onto the courthouse as it is. I would rather see a independent standalone building somewhere else before we go and start changing the aesthetics of that building. That's just my preference in terms of what we're doing. And so again, it's a beautiful building inside. I think, trying to keep, and I know you guys have been very on top of trying to maintain the aesthetics of it in terms of the historical value and everything, because it is beautiful. It's beautiful inside there, and we need to retain that every way we can. So again, with the existing space that's there, trying to squeeze it all in. And I know you guys have all been very good about trying to come out. I know Lauren, I know we've talked about reducing space from the standpoint of all the file cabinets. We are in a digital age, and if we can eliminate tons and tons of file cabinets that sit around, that's one of my pet peeves. Is let's start storing them where they need to be stored these days, and that's obviously helped with some floor space. But in any other things that we can do like that, I mean, again, we talked about video. Things that, let's use the technology as much as we can in any way we can in the future. From a security standpoint, I'm not going to open another can of worms here, but I would love to see the main entrance maintained as a main entrance, but from a pure security standpoint, having the design that we have there for access through the walkway ramp area is the most feasible, and having another separate little security checkpoint there with some actual room for your guys to actually be in a room instead of sitting out in the open there, I think it's a grand idea, and that'll help with the processing and the actual security itself. So beyond that, again, it's a matter of trying to squeeze a little bit more into the can. And I don't remember who said it, but it means a little more compromise probably on everybody's part.
A lot of good things have been brought up. I don't have a lot more to say. I know as a council and looking at the budgets and the debt load of the county, like Darren said, we had a number that we kind of were comfortable with. We also know that things aren't getting cheaper the more we prolong this process. So from that standpoint, I hope that we can work this out based on the needs of the court and of the other offices. If we can all pull together and get this project moving, I think that's going to be better for everyone. I know there's going to be expansion things in the future. We can deal with that. I know we can't do another building right now. We can't add on. We don't want to add on to that building. So if we can all, pull together to get this completed, I think that's going to be great. And, I'm telling myself with those improvements that we have to do anyway, that brings that number down in my head. So it makes me a little bit more comfortable with it, because, we have that $4 million and we have to do stuff with it. But that's where I am right now, and I think we can all work together and get there. I think Daviess County is very good about working together. Always have been, and I'm optimistic that we'll get this done. So.
Echo a lot of what's been said. The very first time we met, with Matt and Mike and I were in there, and one of your representatives said it was going to be 20 million, and turned around and said, "How much are you willing to spend?" And I thought he was being sarcastic, and he wasn't. We always had a number between 10 and 12, and obviously it's over that. The question that I get addressed to me is, how can you build such a nice facility here and move half your people over there and still that building not be big enough? And that's a really good question. I'm not in favor of it. Any elevators on the outside of the walls, changing anything on the structure of the building, anything on the deteriorize the historical value of the building. So what we need to do is to tweak, find a little space to get this to work. But unfortunately, I guess we'll have to live with that number. But we have to make this work with what we have and not look at any other options.
Michael?
I think the microphone's dead, so I'll try to speak up a little bit. I want to echo the same thing as everybody else. It's fine. But at the end of the day, I'd still like to see this historic courthouse stay historic and not do any additions to the outside. Just too pretty of a courthouse. You drive around the state and see different courthouses. We got one of the nicest ones in the state. If you look around, a lot of them. And the number, it's high, but we've got a lot of mechanical and just maintenance issues. At the end of the day, we got a 100-year-old building there. We've kept it up pretty good, but the heating, cooling, and the mechanical is just to the end of its limit. So we've got to respect that and get that taken care of. I think we're down to just the magistrate portion not being big enough. We can figure out a way to get that bigger as long as the judges are happy. Sounds like everybody else is happy with the space. We can just get that point, a bigger space for them and make it more productive for them. I think
got a pretty good project ahead of us, so. Thanks. I'm not gonna add anything to what already been said, other than I agree with Darren that it's a crying shame that we can't figure out some way to use the front of the building as an entrance. You've got a beautiful building, but yet we're sending everybody through the basement. As far as the courts, to me, it looks pretty simple. We need to come up with about 500-600 square foot of space to add to the magistrate court, and that ought to be able to be done somehow. And as far as the cost, I look at it like it's the commissioner's job to decide what to do and the council's job to pay for it. So I'll leave it at that.
Sure. Yeah, well, for the sake of time, how about this? I've got a few different action plans here. So we're going to look at the judges' chambers as far as the orientations of the judges' chambers to see if there's a better layout. We need more seating capacity in the magistrates' courtroom, and we need more seating capacity for the court reporters. Obviously, if we can magically find 30 in the magistrate, wonderful. If it's 20, maybe we can live with that. And then perhaps 3 court reporters. I think if we can find a way to accomplish all of that, I think we're ready to roll. I would suggest we set a February 28th deadline, which is our second commissioner meeting in February, because if we are going to do a project, we have got to get the project going, or else we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars redoing things and going back, and we're going to be no further ahead. So reevaluate the front door usage. I think we need to take one more stab at that. 3 court reporters, try to increase the seating capacity to 30 max. Again, it could be 17. It just needs to be more than what it currently is, and then we'll take another look at it. And then move the judges' chambers, or the 4 action items. Give us a month to do that, because it's going to take some back and forth. And come back to the commissioners. I'll keep the council in board, and then on February 28th, we got to decide if we're going to build, or are we just going to go a totally different direction, because I don't know. Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, as long as I'm somewhat involved, since I'm kind of spearheading it right now, that's my only request. Because I can't have 5 department heads pulling left and right and forward and backwards, and you guys do the same thing 3 times, and that's not what was happening. But yeah, so I'll need you guys to work directly together, and just CC me on it, because it may create an idea that I didn't think about. But yeah, that's the only way it will be successful, is if you guys work directly. All right, fair enough. And again, hats off to Darren and Matt and Tom, who have kind of been my bunker mates through this process. And the department heads. I mean, we've asked the same questions 4 times, right? And so it's had to be annoying to you guys, because we just had to get our minds wrapped around. I mean, you all, not just you guys. So appreciate the patience. If there's no further comments, we will bring this back to the second meeting in February and put a fork in it. Okay?
Motion to adjourn from the council. By Matt, second.
Second.
My Mike. All in favor, right?
Aye. Motion to adjourn the meeting for the commissioners. Okay, moved by Commissioner Taylor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Arnold. All in favor? Aye. The meeting's adjourned.
Is that a joint meeting again on the 20th?
No, it won't. No. The council can come to our commissioners meetings if they'd like, but it won't be a joint meeting. As soon as we get the updates, you're going to.